Alright, we got 7 SAT math problems. Feel free to pause the video, and without further ado, let's get started. So solve for x in the equation 2x minus 4 is equal to 12. Well, if we're trying to solve for x, we have to isolate the variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 4 to both sides. Right, so you want to get the x alone. So add 4 to both sides. You get 2x is equal to 16, right? Because this negative 4, this positive 4 just cancels out, and 12 plus 4 gives us 16. If we want to isolate x, we're going to divide both sides by 2. We get x is equal to 8. So that x is equal to 8. And you can check the solution, right? If you plug in x is equal to 8, you get 2 times 8, which is 16, minus 4 is equal to 12. And indeed, that is true. Solve the quadratic equation x squared minus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0. What you need to know is you got to be able to factor things. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for two numbers that multiply out to be 6. So you want two numbers, let's just call them A and B. Two numbers that multiply out to be 6, but they add up to be negative 5. So when we want to factor something, look for two numbers that multiply out to be the constant term, so the term without the x, and they add up to be the coefficient for the x term. So this number right in front of the x, that's what they have to add up to. And the correct combination is negative 3 and negative 2, because negative 3 times negative 2 gives us 6, because negative makes a positive. Negative 3 plus negative 2, that's just going to give us negative 5. And if we have some number, so let's say if we have two numbers, right? Let's say if we have x times y, and they're equal to 0. Either x is equal to 0, or y is equal to 0. All right, so that's something important to know. This is something known as the zero product property. And in other words, this basically says, okay, if we have two or even more numbers multiplied, if I had z here, either z would have to be 0, but let's just stick to two numbers. So if we have two numbers that multiply out to be together, either one number is 0 or the other number is 0. There's kind of no other way out of it, right? If we have, let's just stick with the example here. If we have two numbers that are being multiplied together, at least one of them has to be equal to 0, right? Try to find two numbers that aren't 0 multiplied together. They're not going to be 0, right? 1 times 3 ain't 0. But if one of them was 0, then this equation would be true, right? So that's the zero product property. So in this case, either x minus 3 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 3, right? We add 3 to both sides to isolate the variable. So either x is equal to 3, or x is equal to 2, right? If we add 2 to both sides here. Notice how, for this quadratic equation, I'll just write it down. So we have x squared minus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0. And let's just check our answer. So if x is equal to 3, right, let's check both of our answers. So if x is equal to 3, we plug 3 in here, so we get 3 squared minus 5 times 3 plus 6 is equal to 0. 3 squared is 9, so this is 3 squared is 9. 5 times 3 is 15, so it's going to be minus 5 times 3, 15, plus 6. And 9 minus 15 plus 6 is equal to 0. So all of this checks out. If we were to plug in 2 to our equation, we would get, well, everywhere we see an x, right? If x is equal to 2, then that means that everywhere we see an x, right, we're going to replace it with a 2. So we're going to get 2 squared minus 5 times 2 plus 6 is equal to 0. It's the same thing as before, except everywhere I see x, I just replace it with a 2. 2 squared is 4 minus 5 times 2, that's 10, plus 6 is equal to 0. 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 minus 10 is 0. Checks out. The ratio of the length of two sides of a triangle is 3 to 5, and the longer side is 15. What is the length of the shorter side? Well, we can just set up a ratio. Or, we know this ratio right over here, so we can set up a proportion, my bad. So if we're given a ratio, we're given this longer side, what we can do is we can say, okay, I know that the ratio between these two numbers, 3 to 5, right? The length of the shorter side to the length of the longer side is in a ratio of 3 to 5. Now I know what my longer side is, right? I know my longer side is 15, and I want to find out what my shorter side is, right? Notice how the longer side is in the denominator. So that means I'm going to put, our longer side's in the denominator, and so is kind of the ratio for the longer side, right? And in numerator, we have the shorter side, right? The ratio of the shorter side, and then the shorter side itself. So it kind of like matches up, And solving for x, you could just recognize that 5 times 3 gives us 15. So if I multiply this by 3, I get that x is equal to 9, right? If 5 times 3 gives us 15, well then if I multiply the numerator by 3, I should get x. So x is equal to 9. Or you could just, cross multiply and solve it. Same thing. So the length for a shorter side is 9. A car travels 60 miles per hour for 3 hours and then 40 miles per hour for 2 hours. All right. What is the average speed of a car for the entire trip? Now, if you don't know how to approach this problem, let's do an easier problem. Let's say if I have a guy eating a burger. All right. For the first hour, let's say for the first hour, he eats 1 burger. And for the second hour, he eats 3 burgers. How many burgers did he eat per hour on average? So I want to find out the average number of burgers, he ate per hour. How would you do this? Well, simple, right? If we want to find out the average number of burgers he ate per hour, how many burgers did he eat every hour? Well, you would take the total amount of burgers he ate. So in this case, first hour he ate 1, second hour he ate 3. 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. This represents the total number of burgers he ate. And we're going to divide it. So total amount of burgers. And we're going to divide it by the total amount of time. So the total amount of time that's passed. So in this case, the total amount of time that's passed is going to be 2 hours, right? First hour, second hour. So that means on average, he ate 2 burgers per hour. So you take the total amount of in this case, burgers, and you divide it by the total amount of time. Let's apply it to this problem. If a person travels 60 miles for 3 hours and then 40 miles per 2 hours, what's the average speed of the car? Well, to solve this problem, you're going to take the total distance traveled, and you're going to divide it by the total time that's passed. We're using the same logic as we did for the burger problem. And that's going to give us our average speed. Remember, speed is distance over time. So if we're traveling 60 miles for 3 hours, then that means in total for this time period, we traveled 180 miles, right? Because every mile we're traveling 60 miles, right? Every hour we're traveling 60 miles. If we're doing that for 3 hours, 60 times 3 gives us 180. If we're traveling 40 miles per hour for 2 hours, well, that's 80 miles in total here. So 180 miles plus 80 miles gives us 260 right here, 260 miles. And how much time has passed? Well, 3 hours plus 2 hours gives us 5 hours. So 260 divided by 5. What is this going to be equal to? This looks like 52. 52 miles every hour. And we're done. The area of a circle is given by pi r squared. If the area of the circle is 36 pi, what's the radius of the circle? Just substitute this into the equation. If we know that the area is 36 pi, and we know that the area is equal to pi r squared, we'll just solve for r. We're going to divide both sides by pi. So the pi's cancel out, and we get 36. 36 is equal to r squared. Square root both sides. We get that r is equal to 6. You might be saying, wait, the square root of this number right over here is just going to be plus or minus the square root of 36. So shouldn't the answer be plus or minus 6? Well, the radius of a circle can't be a negative value, so we're just going to stick with positive 6. Simplify the expression 3x to the second power to the third power. Remember back to what exponents do. If you have x to the second power, you're just multiplying x by itself 2 times. X to the third power, you're just multiplying x by itself 3 times, right? So if we have 3x squared to the third power, what I'm doing is I'm taking the 3x squared and I'm multiplying it by itself 3 times. 3x squared times 3x squared times 3x squared. Let's just combine like terms. What's 3 times 3 times 3? That's 27. What's x squared times x squared times x squared? X to the 6th power. When you're multiplying multiplying exponents with the same base, you just add up the powers. So for example, if I have x squared times x to the third power, it's equal to x to the 5th power. I just add up the exponents. So if I have x to the second power times x to the second power times x to the second power, you just add up all of the exponents. So it's going to be 27 times x to the 6th power. A bag contains 3 red balls, 2 blue balls, 5 green balls. If a ball is selected at random, what's the probability that the ball will be blue? Well, the probability that the ball will be blue is just going to be equal to the amount of blue balls there is, right? How many blue balls do we have out of the whole bunch? So how many blue balls do we have out of the total amount of balls? So in this case, I have 2 blue balls. And in total, how many balls do I have? Well, 3 plus 2 plus 5 gives us 10. So the probability is 1/5. Or you can think about this as there's a 20% chance that I will pick a blue ball if selected at random at this point. And we're done.